You know, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is so much more than just a spooky monster story. It's this incredibly deep dive into ambition, responsibility, and what happens when it all goes tragically wrong. In this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers and see how this one catastrophic chain of events leads to absolute ruin. This one line from the creature, man, it gets right to the heart of the entire novel. It asks the biggest question: how does a being that's born innocent turn into a monster? Well, we're going to uncover the answer by tracing this tragic domino effect, and it all starts with one single foundational sin. The entire catastrophe, everything that goes wrong, is set in motion right at the very beginning. It's Victor Frankenstein's first and most critical failure. The second he creates this new life, he completely abandons it. This is ground zero. So, Victor's real sin wasn't just playing God and creating life. It was a total failure of what you might call anticipatory ethics. I mean, he gave zero thought to what he was supposed to do after the experiment worked. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a simple oversight. It actually springs directly from his own messed up mind. Okay, so Victor runs screaming from his lab, right? And it looks like pure cowardice. But it's actually a psychological necessity for him. To really get why he ran, we have to look through a psychoanalytic lens. You see, he wasn't just running from the creature, he was running from his own inner monster. And this is where it gets really weird and really interesting. Right after the creation, Victor has this incredibly disturbing dream. So a Freudian read on this suggests his whole ambition wasn't really about pure science. Nope, it was a deeply pathological attempt to conquer the trauma of his own mother's death by conquering death itself. And this right here perfectly captures that internal conflict. On the surface, what he says he wants is scientific glory. But underneath it all, his unconscious is running the show, acting out this deep-seated trauma and this absolute horror at his own monstrous ambition. He's obsessed with creating life, but he is just fundamentally haunted by death. So when Victor looks at his creation, he experiences what Freud called the uncanny. It's that creepy feeling when something is familiar, but just wrong. He doesn't just see an ugly creature. He sees a physical, walking, breathing manifestation of his own rage, his own ambition, his own trauma. He is literally running away from a mirror. Now, Victor's psychological breakdown doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It has consequences. It directly inflicts this profound developmental wound on the creature, and it's a wound so deep that we can actually diagnose it with modern attachment theory. This is basically a perfect clinical diagnosis for what the creature goes through. Think about it. Victor is his only parent, the one person he needs for comfort and guidance. But Victor is also the source of his greatest terror, the one who abandoned him. It's a complete, impossible psychological trap. And this creates this incredibly tragic and, well, frankly, bizarre paradox. The creature is chasing Victor across the Arctic to get revenge, sure. But he's also desperately trying to stay connected to his creator, because even a monstrous parent is the only one you've got. So the creature's personal trauma, it doesn't just stay as pain, it evolves. It starts to harden into this coherent, devastating philosophical worldview. It literally becomes a weapon, one forged in the fires of all that rejection. Now, if we look at this through a Nietzschean lens, we see two massive philosophical failures. On one side, you have Victor, who fails to be the Übermensch, this great creator of new values who actually takes responsibility for them. And then you have the society that rejects the creature. And they embody the last man, just regular people who choose being comfortable over the hard work of compassion. And this all leads to the core of the philosophical tragedy. The creature's natural will to live and connect gets crushed, and it inverts into what Nietzsche called ressentiment. His violence isn't because he was born evil. It's a calculated philosophical response. He basically decides, fine, if the world is going to call me a monster, then a monster is what I'll be. So we've seen the psychological flaw in the creator, right? And the developmental wound in the creation. And then the philosophical rebellion that follows. So how do all these pieces lock together to create a tragedy that's just so completely inescapable? So what really caused all this? Well, the answer is, it wasn't just one thing. It was a catastrophic chain reaction. It was like a line of dominoes where each failure knocks over the next, creating this cycle of destruction that absolutely no one can escape. Let's just walk through that chain of events. It all starts with Victor's psychoanalytic failure, his inner trauma. That directly leads to the developmental wound he gives the creature by abandoning him. That wound then hardens into a full-blown philosophy of revenge, which then gets validated and reinforced by a prejudiced society. It just shows how one single personal flaw can cascade into a massive systemic catastrophe. This table really puts it all together, showing how these different frameworks each expose a vital part of the collapse. Psychoanalysis shows us Victor's immaturity. Attachment theory diagnoses that broken parent-child bond, and Nietzschean philosophy explains the creature's turn to vengeance. Put them all together, and you see the true architecture of the tragedy. It's a cycle of, you could call it, reciprocal monster-making. Victor's inner monster creates an external one, and they inevitably destroy each other. And, this story, which is over 200 years old, leaves us with a question that feels chillingly modern. As we stand here today, becoming creators ourselves, on the verge of making new forms of artificial intelligence, are we actually prepared for the profound moral duties that come with that? Or are we just doomed to repeat Victor's failure all over again?